just like this. He tells me, Mother said that this year, this is the last, this is it. We're going to heaven this year. She's tired and she wants to go home. So this year is for sure it. He tells me this at the end of the study in 2023. In 2024, at the end of the sermon, I listened to the sermon and everything. And at the end, it says these words. They say, let us work faithfully and we will be at the gates of heaven at the end of 2024. I just laugh because it's like, what are you guys talking about? Like, you guys have been saying this for 7 years now that I've been here. And that was just one of the things that made me more uncomfortable and to just want me to kind of like start looking into this group more closely.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Today I am joined once again by Anthony, who will be co-hosting with me. And we have another former member of the World Mission Society Church of God who will be sharing his story with us. So Ricardo was a member of the WMS for about 7 years. Is that right? Correct, yeah. Okay, and has not been out for too long. Let everybody know about what was the time frame between you getting in and then when did you leave?
So I was a member from 2017 up until this year, March of 2014. I joined, I want to say around September, October of 2017. And it's been about 3-4 months that I've been out.
Yeah. So not in the whole scheme of things, you haven't been out for too long. And so a lot of this is still fresh. And so I guess before we get into your story, can you maybe talk a bit about why you wanted to come on and share? Like what was the motivation behind wanting to come on this platform?
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me here in your platform. I think it is very important for us to raise awareness of what's going on with this group, not only in the places where you guys have already had the chance to share it, but me, I'm from San Diego, and I just want to let people know that this is happening, that this group is here, and it's affecting people's lives. And also, hopefully, it's a testimony so that people are aware, whoever might be interested in joining this group, or they're looking into joining this group, just so they can be aware of what they're going to be getting themselves into.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Anthony, how are things going for you? Anything new over on your side of the country?
Over in my area, no, nothing too much. There's definitely people who have been reaching out. I think, Jordan, what you do here on Great Light has been helping a lot of people. As you know, I've done a few of these co-hosting, and people reach out to me, and sometimes they're on the cusp of leaving. They're on the but your videos kind of help them feel more confident with leaving. So I definitely have noticed people reaching out, people I've known, which is really great. Where I meet a lot of new people like Ricardo, but I've also met and spoke to a lot of people who I've met and known, and they're leaving, and they're feeling a lot more confident leaving. So, I've been noticing more and more of that sentiment where people are comfortable to leave. And I think that these videos are doing a lot of help.
Yeah, that's great. It's always great to hear from new people that are watching the videos. And some people are just kind of plainly saying that it was through watching the videos, and most of the time the former member interviews, that they ultimately decided to leave. But Ricardo, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, actually, I want to add to that, because these videos really did help when I was kind of doing my research about what's going on in this organization, because I had already seen a lot of inconsistencies. And Anthony was actually one of the first people that I reached out to and was able to talk to, and he was helped me out to understand, what it is that I had gone through, and helped me get connected with other people who also helped me to understand the Bible a little better, and that really helped out a lot, because when you're getting out, you just don't know where to look. because all your energy and all your trust was in this group. You relied on this group for guidance, and once you decide to get out, once you find out that it's not the truth, you just don't know where to go, and you feel very alone. So, and I also want to invite people, whoever sees this, if they know me or if they want to talk at all, post an interview, after this comes out, they're more than welcome to. I'm here for them.
Yeah, thank you both for the encouragement there. And I guess I wasn't planning on this, but I'm realizing I need to more often let people know that the reason these interviews and I'm able to continue doing all this is because of the people who support the channel on a monthly basis. Contrary to what I just saw in the comments, and it's always funny when I see it, is on Tony and Lindsay's interview, but a member commented something along the lines of, it's crazy how these people all go on podcasts for the money or something like that. To which I always respond with, I would like where is that money? Because I don't think myself or Tony and Lindsay or Anthony, none of us we haven't seen it yet, but all this takes a lot of time, and the editing and the even, all the behind the scenes stuff. And so just thank you to everybody who continues to support this channel and the Answering the WMSCOG channel. That is what allows me to continue to be able to do all this. And I'd love to be able to do more, as I've said before, to do it more consistently, to put out, interviews more consistently, do live streams more consistently, just things that I can't do super consistently at this point just because of the limited amount of support. But I am very thankful to those who are supporting. And of course, there's always information in the description of all these videos for how you can support the channel to help us to continue to do all this. So with that, Anthony, I know that you have talked to Ricardo, and so you're somewhat familiar with his story already. And so is there any place that you think might be good to start, or do you have any questions that you would want to ask right up front?
Well, I like the maybe in like chronological order for his story. Like, I wanted to hear more about, what was his interest? What were the things that before he joined the church? What did his life look like? What were the things that he found a passion in before he got into this organization? So, Ricardo, if you could tell us a little bit, about what your life looked like before you came into the World Mission Society.
For sure. Yeah, so I'm from a Catholic background. That's how I grew up in my family. But I feel like I never had a true and full understanding of who God is and who Jesus Christ is and what he did for us. And I was always curious to find out more. So before I joined this church, I would actually read the Bible by myself, just seeking for answers, really, because I was always kind of curious about it. There's a Bible in every household, and there's the contents in it are hard to understand sometimes. So I really wanted to know what the Bible said. I really wanted to know who God truly is and what was our purpose here in this world. So whenever I would get the chance to speak to religious people, I would ask them questions, just trying to understand it, trying to see if they knew who God is, if they could somehow help me be guided to the truth. And I had good interactions with other groups prior to joining this group, such as Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, but I was never kind of satisfied by the way they taught the Bible. And then one time, I was requesting an Uber, actually, and the guy that was driving, we started talking, and we kind of got along pretty well. And towards the end of the ride, he asked me if I believed in God. And my answer was yes, I believe in God. I actually read the scriptures on my own. I don't go to a church or nothing, but I study the scriptures. But I wasn't very knowledgeable at that time. I didn't have a good understanding of who Jesus Christ was or what the gospel was. But I wanted to know. I was looking for a teacher. So I think I was the perfect candidate for them. I was also young and kind of naive to a certain extent. And honestly, I was pretty impressed by the way he would teach the Bible. I'd never seen such thing, because any question that I would ask him, he would grab the Bible and he would open it somewhere, and then he would go to a totally different book that somehow kind of connected to this one verse, and then he would go to a totally different book to show me something else that connected with these two verses. And in my eyes back then, it made sense. This was the first time that I interacted with someone who seemed like they actually knew the Bible. And in my mind, it was a book full of secrets that not everybody knew, and I was trying to find out what those secrets were. So he preached to me the seal of God right away. It was the first thing he showed me.
Ricardo, for those who might not know, can you kind of describe what the study seal of God is?
Yeah.
And then get back to the story.
Yeah. So my initial question to him was about the end of the world, because back then, well, even now, of course, but back then, there was a lot of chaos going on in regards to like natural disasters and things like that. So in my mind was like, there's no way we're gonna last forever. At some point the world has to end. When is that gonna happen? And what does the Bible say about that? Because it's kind of referencing about the end of the world. So that's what I was curious about, and that's what I asked him about. And he showed me in Revelation 7:1, where it's talking about the four angels holding the winds, so they don't damage anything in the earth, basically. So then he moves on to other verses in the Bible explaining how those winds represent a world war that could break out on the world at any point, at any moment. And the way to not be affected by this war was to be protected by the seal of God. So he kind of stopped there. He didn't want to continue that study fully. He wanted to meet up sometime in the future to just kind of go over the study, and where it would be a little more convenient for him, I guess. But I was curious.
So in your conversation with him, he basically told you there's about to be a global disaster to destroy the whole earth, and you need a seal of God to be protected. And I'm leaving it at that.
Yep.
And he kind of left it with this big problem and a lingering like cliffhanger, to get you on the hook.
Yeah, basically. So I was wondering, man, what is the seal of God? I need it because the world could end at any moment. The winds could be released, and I don't have it, so I'm in danger here.
Yeah. Just it's their bait to get you hooked on their reel, so they can get you into their their Bible studies and into the church and have a little bit more control of the environment that you're in, so they can just continue their manipulation.
Man, I'm thinking as an ex-member, I would have used that tactic. Man, I would have loved it. If I would have thought of that, I would have done that. But that would have been my way to recruit. But I'm sorry, go on.
Don't be giving any ideas now, man.
Yeah, I know. But, hey, if they do that, it's really sneaky, everyone. Don't let them do that to you.
Yeah.
So a couple of days passed by. I want to say maybe a week, maybe a little less. And then he texted me again if I wanted to study. And I had kept on reading the Bible on my own, but still, there was not, of course, in a couple of days, you don't understand the Bible. So he tells me if I want to study again, if I want to finish, continue the study that we had. And I tell him, yeah, I'm open to it. I accept the invitation, and then we go on to the church. So when I get there, we go to to the small room upstairs, and there was nobody at the church at that time. There's barely any people. I think later they told me that it was like the last day of a certain feast, so everybody was probably like super tired, and they just all went home. Um, so I go
Okay.
upstairs and study, and he starts showing me what the seal of God is. Um, he starts telling me that, basically, disasters could come, like big stuff, like a big war could come to the earth at any point, and that those who don't have the seal of God, they're not protected. But if you have the seal of God, then you're good. Nothing is gonna happen to you. Um, Basically, you're just God will protect you from anything. And they falsely claim that the seal of God, that you get the seal of God once you keep the Passover, um, which which is not true. Um, if you look at Ephesians, it tells you right there when it is that you get the seal of God. Um, but he honestly, I was kind of moved by the way he was teaching the Bible, and it made sense to me at that time. Um, so he asked me if I want to get the seal of God. He tells me that I can get the seal of God right there and then, so that I can go home and not have to worry about anything. I'll be good. I just have to be baptized. So I believe by then he had already showed me the new name, because in this study you have to reference the angel that comes from the east with the seal of God. So he told me how this angel was Ahnsahnghong, and I was thrown. I was really like shocked by when I read this name. It was very weird to me, and it kind of scared me a little bit, because it's not something that I have heard in the past. And but I just kind of put it to the side for now, because what he was showing me in the Bible was pretty strong, and like I said, it made sense to me. So I agree to go ahead and get baptized on that same night, because of the pressure and because of the fear that I had. What if I go home and something happens, and I don't have the seal of God, or if the world ends tomorrow?
Is that one of the things that they said to you? I know that that's one of the things they said to a lot of people who are going to be baptized is, you don't know what's going to happen to you if you leave. Don't boast about tomorrow. They do be baptized immediately. And they explain, you could walk out of here and get hit by a bus and then you don't have, salvation. Was that one of the things that they had said to you, or was that your own fear
No, they
coming up?
definitely said that to me. So I agreed to get baptized. He goes downstairs, and I guess he's told that I cannot get baptized unless I study about mother. I hadn't studied about that yet. So he comes up and he's like, "Okay, we just got to do one more study about something that we believe in very strongly." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, let's go." And I was already, like I said, I was enjoying the Bible study, because we were putting pieces together in my mind, and getting to the truth. So he shows me, a couple of verses about mother, and again, it makes sense to me because it's in the Bible, and I'm not very knowledgeable in the Bible at that time. Um, he shows me Genesis 1:26, Revelation, and then at the end, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. I'll get baptized. So I go. We go downstairs and we do the whole thing, the bread and the wine, and then I just go home. Afterwards, I thank him for the Bible study and everything. Me in my mind, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm saved. I'm protected by God. I have the seal of God. Even if the world ends, I'll be good. Um, but sometime later in the week, I want to say a week passed by, and he shoots me a text asking me if I want to go to a worship on Saturday. And at this point, I don't know what Saturday is, what Sabbath is. I haven't studied that. I've only studied Seal of God, and I want to say the new name, Savior of each age,
Mm-hmm.
and Mother, which I guess are the requirements for you to be baptized. And he tells me, yeah, Saturday is very important for your spiritual health, something like that, something along those lines. And I think about it, I really don't want to be involved in a religious group like this. Back then, I just want to kind of keep doing what I'm doing, just kind of working and not being very distracted by something of the sort. But he convinces me. I agreed to go. And man, that study that we had, they basically, I remember I studied the Sabbath day and also the secret of forgiveness. And
Mm-hmm.
the amount of guilt that they put in me that day, I remember hearing the
Yeah.
words, "You're a sinner.
So,
You don't deserve anything." And I'm shocked. I'm like, wow, like I can't believe someone who studies the Bible, who's a Christian, is telling me this.
so just to circle back, Ricardo, you had mentioned that they did the study, The Secret of the Forgiveness of Sins. For those who might not know what this particular study is, it's when the church teaches their doctrine that there was a pre-existence, that we tried to murder God in heaven and we were serial killers in heaven, and that's all the souls on earth are cast out angels. And now the only way for us to be redeemed is through Passover, celebrating their Passover, that this church says that they're the only ones that keep. But I did have a question about your baptism. During that time, when they were saying, you have the option to be baptized, you had mentioned that they mentioned the name Ahnsahnghong. Was that a factor that made you want to be baptized, or was it more of the seal of God aspect that made you want to be baptized? Was it them saying Second Coming Christ came and you were amazed by it and you wanted to be part of the church, or was it just for the seal of God, the fear that they gave you, and the little shred of hope that you will be saved from disaster?
Or maybe a mixture.
Yeah, it could be a few different things, but like, what was the determining factor for you deciding to be baptized?
Honestly, it was only the seal of God. I just wanted to be protected from disasters that could happen. Because what was driving me at that time was the fear of what could happen to me at any point.
Mm-hmm.
It was not so much because I hadn't seen a lot of evidence for Ahnsahnghong being the second coming Christ yet. They just showed me a couple of things, and it didn't mean much to me at that point, but they had showed me enough for me to be convinced about the seal of God and how effective it could be at protecting someone according to their doctrine. So that's really what convinced me to be baptized.
Yeah. And I do also want to mention, because your story is a little bit different than some other stories of people who were baptized in earlier years. For my time, we didn't hear the name Ahnsahnghong or, learn too much about God the Mother, that teaching, until we've been baptized and then continue to go through the course of lessons. They want you to believe the law, and then they will slowly introduce, Second Coming Christ, then God the Mother. But after a while, I think that they were being called out for their deceptive tactics, and they created a checklist that they could apply or not apply, where you had to do, I think, 1 or 2 truth studies, as they call it, and have to know about Ahnsahnghong and God the Mother before baptism. So they created a new system around the time you were baptized. But since then, I've seen them either use it or not use it, or just, somehow casually slip in, and Ahnsahnghong. And, they'll find a way to to bear their fruit without actually having to scare someone off with the name Ahnsahnghong. But I think during the time of your baptism, there was a new method that was going around where you had to have those two studies at least discussed, and then also like some sort of what they call a truth study. So that's just why, maybe your baptism story is a little bit different from those who were baptized earlier on and they didn't hear Ahnsahnghong until the baptism room. So now
I'm curious.
Go on.
I'm curious because they taught you about God the Mother in the Bible, but did they, in that initial study, do you remember if they specified to you or clarified to you that they actually believed that there was a human being who was God the Mother and she was alive in South Korea, and tell you the name or anything like that? Or did they just kind of give you the basics of the doctrine?
No. So they didn't. They just told me that she exists and we have her and she's in heaven. But they never told me that it was a certain individual who was taking care of their church, or who was the head of their church.
Yeah.
They never told me that until I think months after all this had taken place, and that just came from me just kind of asking questions. I think the first time I got to see actually find out it was someone was when I attended a worship in the morning and they showed a video of her up on the screen, and I was just wondering who that was. And then I come to find out that's who they were talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was there, I saw her photos. They had like pictures on the wall, and I said, "Oh, who is she?" And all they would say is, "Oh, she's very important to the church. You'll learn more about her later." And that was they wouldn't tell you, this is who we believe is God. Like, not like 2,000 years ago, how they would proclaim, yes, Jesus is the Savior. This is more of, we'll wait for you to be full of like fear and guilt, and then we'll reveal who this is to you. Because it sounds like they first got you with the fear and gave you the lesson about the seal of God, like this is the only way to be protected. And then they brought you back, and then they taught you about you're a sinner from heaven, and this is, you owe God so much, so you're in debt to God, so you have to do more for God, which is, I think, a big purpose of that study. So you come for your first Sabbath day worship and Bible study, and how does that go?
Well, I also want to tell people who are listening that it can sound kind of weird how you can fall for these kind of ideas and beliefs, but the thing is they don't tell you before you study. They tell you while you're reading the verses. So you're going from verse, and they say, so what does this verse say? It says this. But before you have any time to actually read it carefully and read the context of it before and after, they jump to another verse. So you're just left with that. You just have to trust them that that's how it is. And that's basically how it went for basically all of my studies that I was doing there while I was still a new member. And when I go, now to answer your question, when I go my first Saturday, now they tell me that it's super important to keep this all Saturdays, and that the origin, how the Saturday is so important, and why all the other churches cannot save you because they don't keep Saturday, because they're doing something pagan, which is Sunday. They say that because it's Sunday, you're worshiping the sun god. So, and you're not really worshiping the God the creator, right? Jesus Christ. So they show you a verse in Exodus that the Exodus 31, where it says that anyone who doesn't keep the Sabbath is to be put to death. And they use that to put fear in you, and they basically tell you, see, if you don't keep the Sabbath as a member of God, then you cannot be saved. You're going to be put to death, not physically, of course, but spiritually, because we're the spiritual Israelites, according to them. So that's what they use to kind of have me go every Saturday.
So more fear to get you to go to their indoctrination sessions. And then they also say we're the only church that does this, so they're nurturing a dependence. So you feel like I have nowhere else to go, and I need to be here to save my soul. And so they created this like very fearful situation for you. And do you start keeping the Sabbath day worships after that point, or what's your journey after that? Because now you're only about a week
Yeah,
or two into it.
yeah, I do. Of course, I thought I was okay with the seal of God, just like they had told me. But then I come to find out that also the Sabbath is a requirement. But I start to just keep the morning service, and I think later I start keeping the afternoon service because I think just they just kind of wanted me to go a little slow, little by little. And also back then, I was a music performer, so I had my band and I had a group which I was very passionate about, and I had years of been working towards achieving that goal of having a band, a group that I could play music with. It took a lot of years and a lot of effort for me to get to that point, and it was something that I loved doing. It was my passion and it was my dream. But of course, we would get hired to play mainly on Saturdays. Um, and
Mm.
once they find out that I was doing that, I could see it in their faces that it made them really uncomfortable that I was being part of that, and coming to church on Saturdays. So eventually, little by little, they start pushing um, towards me leaving that, saying that it's worldly and that it's just gonna affect my relationship with God and just my path, in the life of in the gospel, basically.
So you can't be a musician and also worship God.
According to them, yep.
So, about how long then were you in before you gave that up?
Honestly, it took me a little while because I want to say about 6 months to a full year before I gathered the people in my band and I was like, you know what, guys, you guys know I've been going to this group, studying with them, and I and I'm growing in faith in God and this and that. And I think it's time for me to just kind of dedicate my life to this group. And of course, they were super upset because we had all been working super hard to accomplish this, and we were getting better and better and better with time. And people loved it when we would go to perform. I could see the energy in people, how they would love it. They wouldn't want us to leave, and we were doing good, and we all loved it. But you know, they put it in my mind to where it's either this or salvation. And I think it's important for me to at this point
Mm-hmm.
reference a part of the Brown Book because there's a section in the Brown Book that says to put the Sabbath day above everything else. I don't know if it would be ideal to do that right now.
Well, if you want, if you have the
Yeah,
excerpt
I have it right here.
prepared, the Brown Book is the book "My Sheep Listen to My Voice" by the General Pastor. He wrote basically an instruction manual to be a member, with some very outrageous outrageous expectations that are in there. I'm waiting for them to revise it. I'm sure that they're going to take a lot of the craziness out sooner or later, but um, yeah, in the section I think he's referencing, there's a lot of expectations put on the members for how they're supposed to keep the Sabbath holy and all the ways that they can desecrate it. And thinking about worries of the life, things you have to do outside, family, things like that, is going to distract you from salvation. Do you have the excerpt
Yeah. So if you
prepared,
have
Yeah.
that,
or
go ahead and read it.
So it says it's on the chapter about the Sabbath day. It's point number 7. It's titled "Our Attitude Toward the Sabbath," and it reads, "The Sabbath should have priority over all other worldly things because on it God blesses us. The Sabbath is a day of blessing and fellowship. If there were no blessings from God, how miserable would our life be? God has prepared blessings to change the misery into happiness, pain into comfort, and sadness into joy. These blessings are given to us on the Sabbath day. Which one? Pay attention to the manipulation here. It says, which one will you choose? A blessing or a curse? Of course, you want to live a pleasant, hopeful, comfortable, and happy life. If you really want to live this kind of life, please keep the Sabbath day holy and you will receive God's promised blessings. Now, this is kind of what got me. Do not break the Sabbath, even if something urgent comes up. If you fail to observe the Sabbath because of a worldly matter, it is an act of rejecting God's blessing. So, and that's the manual from the general pastor.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And think about all the many things that would fall underneath that category of urgent matter. Anything from a wedding of a family to a funeral, birthdays, and just, important family moments that you can almost guess that probably is largely what he had in mind when writing that, because he didn't want anything to get in the way of members coming every Saturday and having and maintaining that control. And so like you said, it's just that manipulation there where he holds it out as you can either choose the curse or you can choose the right way and the path of blessing. And to get this way, to get the blessing, you're going to have to give up these quote unquote urgent matters. And it's just,
and for whoever
it's a
wants
mess.
to say that I didn't have enough faith in this and that's why I'm leaving now, that's absurd, because I gave up my dream and my goals just to be there on the Sabbath day. So that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll also say, Ricardo, that one thing that, for a lot of members, they do have to make sacrifices inside of their own career in order to be a member. Like the church requires a lot of dedication and people lose out on their work. But in your situation too, it wasn't just, your decision was not just affecting you and your livelihood and all the things you've been working for in your life. You also had the things that other people were working for also being affected by your decision in the church. Not only were you giving up your dreams, but you were also, in a way, hurting the development of other people as well. And I'm sure that guilt must have been a big factor when you were making the decision to walk away from your band that was getting these great gigs and, having a lot of performances and getting a reputation. How was their reaction? Because I know that it couldn't have been easy for them.
Man, it was tough. They, if I'm being sincere, they were really my closest friends at the time. They were the ones who I would spend really most of my time with, my free time with. And like I said, we had been working towards building that up and learning together and just practicing countless amounts of hours for a good amount of time. And they didn't take it well. And, I respect it because, I understand. I understand that the amount of time and work that they put in. And I don't blame them for being resentful, because it did affect them. They never, they tried to continue for a while, filling that void with other people, but it just never, it was never the same. It didn't, unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. Honestly, I wish it would have. I didn't want it to affect them in that way, but it did. And they, it's just not the same anymore. They couldn't really continue with what they wanted to do, so they just kind of started doing their own thing. And that affected my closest friendships for a while.
Yeah, I would say that one common theme is that if they're not a member of the church, your friendships basically disappear. One, it's all the commitments and time that you have to spend at the church. Second is, it makes you kind of a weird person that the only thing you ever want to talk to your friends about is you should come to my church and be baptized. And did it, like you trying to scare your friends with the seal of God study and they might not be receptive. But did you feel like you were able to maintain friendships, or did those sort of disappear through
They
the
disappear
church?
little by little. I Because of the indoctrination that they put you through, you're just not yourself anymore. And those friends that you had because they liked who you were, they're just kind of weirded out by who you're becoming. And not only that, like that's a good point that you make, because at first it was the seal of God, then it was Saturday, and then it was preached to everyone you know, because they use the parable of the 10 minas among other parables to explain that if you don't preach to everybody around you, then they are going to go to hell because they don't know the truth, but their blood is going to be on you because you didn't preach to them. So I had to go basically to all my family and all my friends and tell them about the church, basically. And man, this caused so much trouble, uh, and so much hostility in between my friends and in my family. And yeah, I wasn't the same person, and I was kind of acting like the church wanted me to act, not like I wasn't being myself.
So the hostility, did that arise just from your friends and family being frustrated about like the change in you, or was it more, was there frustration coming from, I know you had a Catholic background, so were there like doctrinal debates and disagreements about some of the things that you were teaching, or what, I guess, what was that hostility, I guess, centered
I want to
around?
say it was a combination of all those things. When you have a friend, you want him to be himself and you want him to be real. You don't want him to put up a facade or act as if, because you know him, you know how he is. So now he's acting different all of a sudden to try to convince you to come somewhere. It's not real. You know what I mean? And also, um, to answer the question about the Catholic background on my family, not only my family is Catholic, all my friends were. So one of the first studies that I do in this church, they tell me, well, now you know who the true God is, but the true church should be able to tell you who the enemy is. And then they tell you that they go on to teach you that the Pope is supposedly the Antichrist, and that the whole organization of the Catholic Church is an organization led by Satan to lead people away from the true God, and that everything they do is demonic. And they put as example the saints, Virgin Mary, the veneration of the cross, or just having a cross in general. Um, Basically, everything that Catholics do, they demonize it. And I I have it in my mind that it's my duty to kind of tell them how they're, what they're doing wrong and stuff, and how they should be worshiping God correctly. So of course they don't take that well, and man, it's just bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, telling somebody that their religious practices are wrong is always going to be a source of contention. So,
But not
like,
only not
imagine,
only wrong, not only telling them that they're wrong, but telling them that this is Satan incarnate. The thing you're doing is paramount to sun worship
Man,
and idol worship.
and I was
And yeah,
bold about it, man.
yeah,
I'm not like trying to be, smooth with it or nothing. I'm like, that's Satan. And then you have to, if you want to understand that, you have to study. So of course they take offense at that. They're not like, they weren't doing what was done to
yeah.
me, what was done to me was, okay, let's sit down and let's see what it says right here. No, I was telling them up front. So, of course, it wasn't working.
Yes. I mean, the church's technique is to be very subtle and like slowly introduce things bit by bit. But when you teach them exactly what the church teaches without that like slow filter and to slowly build it up, it's not very palatable for people. It's hard for them to be able to just, accept, you're doing idolatry. These things they have to slowly introduce you to when you're in the church for you to accept it. But when you go out into, your family and you just tell them exactly what the church believes, it's hard for them. But imagine saying the same thing to the World Mission Society members when you go to them and you say, what you're doing is idolatry. What you're doing is, imagine how they're going to react. They're going to cut you off forever, At least, family in like a Catholic church will be a little bit more gracious to you. But if you say that stuff, you're a heretic to a World Mission Society member, they're just going to cut you off and you're a slanderer, you're this, you're that, and they're going to say you're possessed by the devil. It's not a two-way street.
You're right. Well, that's exactly what happened when I got out and started doing my research and reading the Bible on my own. I went back to some of the people who I thought the closest relationships with and the most interaction with, and I told them I'm out of the church because this is what I discovered, and I'm not okay with this. I don't want to keep going here because I don't think it's the truth anymore. Well, guess what? They all have me blocked now. Even the guy that recruited me, I can no longer message him. He has me blocked. But I'm happy to say that there was one person who did listen to me. He was kind of my closest friend inside of the church, and he was humble about it. He listened to me, and also he wasn't part of the San Diego Association anymore. He had gone to New York, and he would message me about things that he saw over there and how it was very different, how they would manage everything differently and how they would carry themselves very differently from here in San Diego. He tells me how here in San Diego, they are super careful about everything that they do and they hide everything really well. But that once you go over there, it's more noticeable that it's really just a business. So fortunately, he listens to me, and I send him a bunch of stuff that he can read, videos that he can watch, and I actually studied with him a little bit, and he got out, and he helped his
Awesome.
family members, count of about 5 or 6 people, also get out. So I'm very happy about that. But definitely, if you try to say that to church members right now, they'll block you. They don't want to hear that, but they want other people to hear that when you're telling them about their doctrines, such as Catholics and stuff. Um, so, of course, having those issues and not respecting other people's beliefs, it causes a lot of problems in your family and your friends, and all you have left is the church members until you get out. Now you don't even have that.
Yes. And you had mentioned too, when you first got out or when you were first leaving, it was a very lonely feeling. I felt the exact same way because, like you said, all your friends are gone. You've, separated yourself from family, and you are walking out into the world without any sort of connections. At least all of your connections are very cold. Like, they haven't been used for a long time. So, I believe that's definitely intentional for them to make it that your only source of connection is in the church. So it's harder to leave. I know that you had mentioned to me that you also had some times where you had to put the church even above your family. If you have, some of that story to share as well.
So as I become indoctrinated, I start to separate myself from my family. And when I started keeping Sabbaths fully and I quit my group and all that, I'm 100% invested in this truth because, and I'll talk a little more about this later, how they told me that the world was supposed to end in 2018. So I also had that pressure on me. And I'll show you guys exactly what verses they used to explain this to me. They no longer teach this because it passed and it didn't happen. But I
Yeah.
remember 100% with 100% certainty that this is what they taught me. So my family, a big part of my family is on the other side of the border. They're in TJ. I'm in San Diego, and when we would go see them is actually on the weekends. And most of the things that they would do were on Saturday, such as family gatherings, birthdays, just any family events that they would do. They would invite me, of course, because they're my family and they love me regardless. But I would turn it down because I'm like, no, I have to keep the Sabbath day. I can't, I can't leave. By the time I'm leaving the church on Saturday, it's already 8, 9 p.m. You know, I'm not gonna be able to travel all the way over there and spend some time with them. It's too late. So I kind of give up not only all of those times with my family on the weekends, but also any kind of traveling that we would do, any kind of vacations that we would organize together. I wasn't a part of that anymore. And the church would encourage this because they would say, well, it's good because it's kind of they can see that you're taking this seriously and that it's kind of a way of preaching to them because you're putting God above your family. So that's kind of what happened with me.
Can I also just mention? I know that with these sorts of sacrifices that you have to make, sometimes or not members, but family members on the outside, they think that you don't care. Like when you're not going to this, they feel like, oh, his heart's so cold to us. But every sacrifice that a member makes, every time like you have to not go to a wedding or a funeral or a family function or a family vacation or see a sick family member in the hospital, all of these different things, they hurt. The member feels it, but they just have to put their emotions and suppress it and just smile through it, even though they don't want to, because that's how much they are fearful that if they step out of line or if they choose their family for even just one weekend, that they're going to ruin their relationship with God, that God will turn God's back on you because you chose one weekend to see your family. So as a member, it does hurt. It doesn't just come easy. So I know that, your family, I'm sure you felt a lot of shame and pain having to say no
Yeah.
to them.
And there's two major events that I want to talk about too. Honestly, now that I've realized that is like all this was just completely false, I feel bad about the decisions that I've made in the past. And one of them, which honestly, truly, I feel really ashamed for doing, but there was this one time when my mother she was sick. She had something, it was like food poisoning, and she was hospitalized in Mexico. And at this time, it's still 2018. So this is a year that I was the most indoctrinated in, that I was involved in the church the most. And their instructions for me is to stay here in the church on Saturday instead of go and see her at the hospital. And I foolishly obey their instructions to stay in Saturday and in the church on Saturday because in their point of view it is more pleasing in the eyes of God to worship Him, and it makes a bigger impact to pray for my mother in the church on Saturday than to go see her at the hospital. And it's something that I'm having a lot of trouble forgiving myself for, just going with that instruction, because it's my mother. She's always been here for me. She's really the most important person in my life. And for me to just abandon her because of a religion when she really needed me, it's just tough. Yeah, and the other one was the funeral of my back then my father. Um, they disencouraged that also, saying that it is better for me to stay in the church and pray for him rather than go to the actual funeral.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's so many decisions like that I think members make that really it's not you making them. And I think a lot of you guys come out feeling guilt about a variety of things, whether it's how decisions different members made with their kids or whatever it might have been. But just having some learning, I think it's important to learn how to have some grace for yourself after you come out, for just realizing how deep that indoctrination goes in a person, how deeply it can impact you, and just the fear, from day one, the amount of fear that was just dictating all these decisions that you were making, because you're so fearful, because they're telling you to be so fearful of the consequences of if you don't stay in line with what they're wanting you to do, with what their expectations are, what you think is going to happen is just so powerful of an influence, and that it can make you make decisions like that, things that you would never do, treat people in ways, people that you love more than the people that you love most, treating them in ways that you never would if you were in your right state of mind. And so I guess maybe one way to think about it, I think members, I think should think about it in a sense. It's like you were kind of slipped some drugs, and without your consent, they were put into your water, and you drank it, and then it wasn't you fully making these decisions. And so I can't really fully understand what that would be like to have that guilt to have to live with. But my encouragement for any member would just to be I think it's not just not taking responsibility. I think it's just accurate to be able to think about it in sort of those terms where it just wasn't fully, it's not fully you guys making these decisions. It's largely just the church making these decisions through you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say that I absolutely agree with what you're saying, that a lot of it is we give up our free will, we give up our independence to choose, and we let the church make our decisions for us, and they're not making the right decisions. So it's easier said than done, though. Forgiving yourself for the things that you should have done with your family, your friends, in your life. It weighs on you even after you leave. And even though we should forgive ourselves, like Ricardo, you should forgive yourself because it wasn't you weren't behind the wheel at this. But it's also difficult. Yeah. And I know that members who are currently in, one day when you leave, this is what you have to look forward to. You're going to regret all the things that you had to say no to for your family. Everything that you're going through and you feel like you're doing for God, it's for a false God. And you're going to see that one day. And the way you treated your parents, or the way you treated, your siblings, your friends, or your own children, it's going to be a regret. And it's unfortunate, but, you skate on by while in the church, just ignoring it. But unfortunately, these things will weigh. And it's not an easy thing when you're doing it, and it lingers after you leave as well. So it's just one of those things that, internally you have to work through and just realize that, when you give up your ability to choose to the church, you're going to live with the consequences of their decisions. So it's unfortunate, but that's just one of the many reasons why this church, this organization really needs to come to an end.
Yeah.
So Ricardo, if you could continue to tell us a little bit more about your experience in the church. And actually, we brought up a really interesting thing about 2018. If you could talk about that as well.
Sure. As I mentioned before, I joined in 2017. And one of the things that they were teaching a lot back then was about the end of the world as referenced in Matthew. So I would actually like to go there and just kind of explain to the audience how it is that they would show you this. It's in Matthew. Actually, it's in Luke 21. So they show you the title, and the title reads the destruction of the temple and the signs of the end times. So right away they read this and they say everything that we're about to read, it's talking about the end times when the second coming of Christ appears. And then they move on to verse 7, where it says, "Teacher," they asked, "when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place?" So it's talking about the end of the world. Basically, they're asking Jesus when the end of the world is going to happen. But according to the WMS, this can only be fulfilled in the second coming of Christ. So they jump to verse 32, and it reads, "Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." So the way they interpret this back then was when the Christ appears, the generation that is there when he appears, it will not pass. It will not go beyond that generation when he's there. And they say, and they told me this way, how long is a generation? It's 100 years. When was the second coming of Christ born? He was born in 1918, according to the WMS. So how much is 100 years from that time? 2018. So according to this prophecy, we should not go beyond the 100 years from when Jesus' second coming happened. And
that didn't pan out for them too well.
No. So I heard it a different way.
Well, I don't know if you would like to share.
I heard a little. I mean, I just Googled why you mentioned how long is a generation, and a generation is 20 to 30 years. But I know that they say it will not pass away. The one that I had heard was in Matthew 24:32, where it says, "Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and the leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that they say he is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." So I was actually one time, I believe it was 2013, or 2012. I was out with this one missionary who actually, he was married to the daughter of the main pastor, and we were preaching I remember it was in Grand Central Station in New York City, and we were in the lower level, and we were sitting down and talking to somebody we had preached to. And he read this to him, and he explained about the World Mission Society's teaching about the fig tree lesson being fulfilled in 1948 with the baptism that allegedly happened to Ahnsahnghong that year, and saying that this generation will not pass away. And then Psalms 90:10, man's life is 70 years, 80 if he has the strength. So he says, all within this one generation, it's going to be fulfilled, meaning that the world will come to an end. Everything's going to be done, within this 70 to 80 years. So that brings us to 2018 to 2028. So right now they gave us a buffer of time. So as early as 2018, but as late as and no longer than 2028. So we're in the middle of the end of the world time.
So we have 4 years left. Yeah,
Very
potentially.
interesting.
I've seen so many apocalypses come and go in this organization that I just can't keep track anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that when they taught you that, or they had brought that teaching up of 100 years, wherever they got that number from, it probably stuck out to you. On the East Coast, my big experience is with 2012, and I remember all the crazy things I did that year for the church. Just gave up like everything that year. How was your 2018 when you thought that the world was about to end that year?
Well, when I told you that it took me about 6 months to a year to get out of my group,
Mm-hmm.
of my band, that was a big reason why. Because according to them, the world was supposed to end in 2018, or else this prophecy wouldn't be fulfilled. And just kind of like that urgency for me to let those around me know what is about to happen, it just created a lot of problems in my family and friends, coupled with that. And I had a lot of fear in me whether I was ready to actually, for the end to come. A constant anxiety and fear, and just kind of basically giving everything up for the church just to be in there.
And isn't that such a clarification as to why it is that they repeatedly point back to these end of the world predictions? Because look at, it's like just this cycle of just this extra control that they can get. It's like this extra push to get people to just throw out everything, get rid of everything, every possible distraction. You saying that this thing that was so central, so important to you, your music, your band, that it was this fear of the end of the world that really was one of the catalysts or the driving factors in you giving that up. Yeah, I think, to me at least, that just is really clarifying in a lot of ways as to why it is that they continue to push this over and over and over again after failed prophecy after failed prophecy after failed prophecy, failed end of the world prediction over and over, because every time they do it, they get this new sort of energy, this new amount of devotion from the members.
People will sell their houses. People will, give up.
Yeah, they'll do anything.
Everything.
They'll do anything.
Cash in their 401k and etc. To, nothing like the end of the world to kick your faith into hyperdrive. So
yeah. And after after 2018 ended, especially during these last months of the year, towards November, December, I was super nervous. But then when 2019 came, they completely stopped talking about it. Like it was never a teaching there. They just moved on to new things. But what were you going to say, Anthony? Sorry about that.
Could you explain, like, I'm sure you didn't ask about it, or did you? Did you ask about it? And if not, think about it. What made you not ask?
The thing is that they say this continually. I realize that at first I want to say what was going on in my mind. In my mind, it didn't end in 2018. So that means we're overdue for the end of the world. They kept saying that Mother is being patient with us because we haven't changed. That's what they're saying. It was already supposed to end, but she's just being patient. She wants to go to heaven already, but she's waiting for us. Yeah,
But it's your fault.
we just haven't done
Yeah.
enough.
It's your fault that it didn't happen. Yeah. We weren't wrong in our prediction of the end of the world. We were right about it all along. And yes, you're right. It didn't happen, but it's actually your fault because you guys just aren't doing. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not doing. Yeah, that's.
And then they want you to thank
classic.
them for it.
Yeah. It's so messed up.
Yeah.
So messed up. So did you? No, sorry. Go ahead. Well, I was just wondering what was that like after that? Because I mean, it sounds like that was significant, like a significant thing in your life that again was influencing you to give up things like your band ultimately. So when that didn't happen, did it kind of I guess fizzle out in your mind? Did you sit and think about that? Did it bother you that the world didn't end and that it didn't kind of play out the way you thought? I guess what was your thought process through that? Did that make you doubt at all? Or
now I was more nervous because like they're telling me that any day could happen now. It's whether it's just a matter of her deciding when it is that she wants the world to be over and we're done. So I'm just, not only me, all the members, they're all kind of like saying, "Oh, any day now, any day the end could come," and we're telling ourselves this, and we're talking about this with each other, and everybody's just nervous. And one thing I also want to mention, I hadn't been very successful in bringing people in, because, like I said before, I was just straightforward. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone. I would show them what I was trying to teach them before I actually sat down with them and showed them the Bible. So I wasn't very successful, but they use some verses in Matthew and John to tell you how. Actually, let me read those real quick. In Matthew chapter 3, chapter 3, verse 8, it reads, "Produce fruit in keeping with repentance." That's the one verse they show you, and for them, the producing fruit means bringing people in, bringing converts in, having someone get baptized, which is totally against the actual Bible teachings. When you read Galatians 5:19, that tells you what the actual fruit of the Spirit is. But for them, bringing converts in is fruit. So the way they explain this verse is, you can bring fruit in if you keep in with repentance. So they say, like, if you're not bringing fruit in, it's because there's something you haven't repented of. There's something you are still doing wrong that only God knows, but we don't know. But before you can bring someone in, you have to repent from that. And they read verse 10, and it says, "The axe is already at the root of the trees, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." So more fear. They tell you that, if you're not bringing fruit in, then what's going to happen to you, you're just going to be cut and you're going to be thrown into the fire. So you're just going to end up in hell. And I'm just left wondering, man, what is wrong with me? Like, why is it that I just can't bring people in? Like, what is it that I'm not repenting of? Because at this point, I'm already tithing, because they say that if you don't tithe, if you don't give a 10% of your gross income, then you're basically cursed because you're stealing from God. I'm already tithing. I'm keeping all services, all feasts. I'm preaching. Basically, I left my band and everything. So I'm just left wondering what do I still need to do? I'm trying my hardest, but it was honestly looking back at it now, it was the fact that I was direct and honest, and I was upfront with people. I wouldn't just invite them to study. No, I would tell them, look, I believe this and that. I believe in Ahnsahnghong. I believe he's the second coming of Christ. I believe there's a woman in South Korea who's 80 years old, who's God in the flesh, and they would just look at me like I'm insane because they haven't gone through the process of actually reading the verses. So that's why my success rate was pretty low, because I wasn't trying to be so deceptive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they make it seem like it's because they say God gives you fruit based on your spiritual state, and it's crazy because you do find people who are having affairs, doing terrible things in their personal life outside of the church, and then they could still get people to come and be baptized. It doesn't depend on like how devoted you are or how much you sacrifice or anything like that. It just depends on who has the charisma, who has the methodology to bring somebody in. It's not about necessarily, where you're at with your faith. You look at some of the most faithful people, some of the leadership, they haven't bore fruit in years. I've known missionaries and deacons and deaconesses who, like, it's been years since they bore fruit. And then the church makes them feel so insecure and so scared about it. But they're giving like 150% of themselves to the church. And, it's just, sometimes it's a numbers game. Sometimes it's just your approach or your likability as a person. But it doesn't have anything to do with you, but they make you feel like you're deficient if you can't bring in people to the church. So it's definitely a numbers game for them.
It's interesting how you came in with, initially with this fear of your need for the seal of God, and then coming in thinking, okay, well now I have it. Now I'm good. I mean, so much of your story, the way you're explaining it, it's making me think about Edgar, a clip I've shared multiple times, where Edgar talks about how it just goes from one thing to the next, and you think you're good, and then they add something else, and that's exactly what I'm hearing played out in your story, where you begin with, okay, this one thing, the seal of God, I need that. And so I'm going to join the church, get baptized. Okay, now I have that. Now I'm good. And then you start to learn, oh, wait a minute. I also have to be here on every Sabbath day. Oh, wait a minute. I also have to tithe. And now it's, oh, wait a minute. If I'm not bringing in quote unquote fruit, the proper amount of fruit, well, I'm in big trouble. And just every step of the way, the underlying motivation for everything you're doing is just this dreadful fear that you're not right, you're not okay, you're not good enough, you're not doing things right, and so you have to just keep, tirelessly striving and exhausting yourself trying to hopefully someday reach that goal that's just in the oblivious future somewhere, that you're going to finally find peace and rest, and you'll feel okay. You'll feel confident that things are good if the world were to end. But it just seems like, at least so far up to this point in your story, you haven't found that. From day one, you went in looking for that, that solace, that peace of mind, that you were okay. That God isn't going to blast you into oblivion if you were to die, and now here you are, years, sounds like, into being in this group, and you still haven't found it, and you're still being kept constantly on the edge of feeling like you don't have that, and you just have to keep doing all these things to lay hold of it and to maintain it. it's just it's such a horrible, abusive
Yep.
mind game. That again, just all this goes back to them just constantly instilling this fear, because look at the amount of control it has over you. If they can get you into this state of mind, then they can get you to just keep working for them. And yeah, so I guess how from there, like how did that progress? Did you ever get to where you were bringing people in? Did you ever find that piece? Did you ever get to a place where you were like, okay, now I'm doing all the things. I feel good. I feel confident. Did that dread and that fear that you're describing, did that ever become something that you weren't really experiencing as a member?
Yeah. Looking back at it now, I actually see it as a great blessing that I wasn't bringing a lot of people in. I'm happy that was the case. But towards the second half of 2018 or the beginning of 2019, I started bringing some people in. I managed to have some people be baptized, after studying a lot. But at this point, I'm feeling tired because I'm dedicating a lot of my time, a lot of my life to the church, and I barely get any sleep. My finances aren't good because, well, why would they be? The world's about to end. So they don't really encourage you to prepare anything. They just encourage you to live as if that day was the last day. And if you keep going on for like that for a good amount of time, then you're gonna find yourself in a very odd position. You're gonna be so behind in so many things because you had been expecting an end that never came. But yeah, eventually I started bringing some people in. My brother, my physical brother, actually gets baptized, but thankfully, he doesn't get so involved in it. He goes to a couple services here and there, and then eventually COVID came, and then he just stopped attending. And I also see when COVID comes, after that, it kind of helps me to kind of step a little bit away from this group, to kind of think for myself a little bit, and to just get a break, man. Because when you're in there, you don't get a break. You're constantly going. I was attending the whole week. Every day I was in the church, studying, reading the books, reading not so much the Bible, because they actually disencourage you from reading the Bible on your own by yourself. And if I would read it, I would kind of read it as trying to find evidence for Ahnsahnghong or God the Mother or things of that sort. I wouldn't read it to understand what the actual message was. I would just kind of try to look for proof of what my current belief was. But I was very dedicated to it, and COVID helped me to just take a little bit of a break, spend a little more time with my family, and just kind of not have that continuous indoctrination from the church. Because also when you're in there, and Anthony knows this too, there's only so many things that you can learn, and once you've heard all of those, it's just you're on repeat mode. So you're just hearing the same thing again. You're studying. You go to a sermon on Saturday, and maybe we're gonna study about tithing, or the sermon's gonna be about the secret of forgiveness, or Sabbath day. They're not gonna teach you anything outside of that. So it's just the same thing over and over again, so you don't forget it, and so it's engraved deep in your mind. Um, but once you're not in there every day because of COVID, you're still kind of keeping services at home and stuff, but it's not the same. Um, and that's the first time in all the time that I was in the church where I could kind of, you know, make my space and have a little bit of time to think for myself. And after that, after COVID, after we started getting back to the church, I was really never as involved as I was prior to COVID.
Yeah, I think that's similar for a lot of members. COVID was really, in that respect, at least, was a good thing, a benefit for a lot of people in cult like situations. I think because it gave them some time to step back and reflect and kind of let some of, I think the indoctrination was able to, you're away from it long enough that it kind of started to dissipate a little bit so that you had more clarity of thought to be able to really think about and recognize probably some of the issues. And so in that way, I've seen over and over again with so many former members that COVID was a pretty big moment in them kind of taking that step back and really asking questions that they needed to ask.
I'd also say that while you're in the church environment, there's a lot of groupthink. Like you're not going to go and have a differing opinion as easily when everyone around you is saying amen. And, you don't want to be the one out of a large group having like, hey, this is a little strange. But if you're kind of sitting by yourself or like with just one or two people, it's easier for you to be able to think clearer for yourself and not be swept up with the opinion of everyone around you. Because a lot of the people around you also have the same opinion you do, but they're just also caught up in the groupthink of, being stuck in this large group of people all doing and saying and believing the same thing. But even if you disagree, nobody's going to speak up. And you feel like if you do, you're the weirdo out of 150 people around you. You're the one who's going to have a problem. So you give up, again, your individual thought for the group environment. So when you're sitting at home and you're by yourself just on a screen on a Zoom meeting for, the church service or the church meeting, it's easier to differentiate yourself from the group in a situation like that. So I think that's another reason why COVID was really helpful for people to deprogram from the church.
And also in my mind, I kept thinking, if we are in the true church and we have God on earth, why weren't we warned that something like this was going to happen? Nobody had a clue. It just caught everyone by surprise. And they had to adjust, kind of see how they could do things during that time. They weren't prepared for anything. No, none of us were. So right there, you can see how they can claim whatever that mother is limited on this world or whatever they want to say. But the truth is, when Jesus came here, he knew the thoughts of the people. He healed the sick. He did countless numbers of things. He prophesied about the end of Israel, just many things. And we don't get any benefit at all being in this organization. So that's one of the things that I also made me kind of think, what am I doing? Because it doesn't line up. It doesn't make sense. And I'm just at home falling behind on a bunch of things in life because I'm just waiting for the end that's not really coming. And even after we got back from COVID and we started keeping service, it's the thing that they would say over and over again. Actually, it's one of the things that kind of prompted me to just get out, just kind of start investigating a little more, because on 2023, little by little after COVID, I stopped kind of keeping services here and there because I was falling behind in life. My finances, just many things in my health, in life, I was just not doing good, and it wasn't benefiting me or those around me. So I started to kind of focus on improving my life a little bit more and just putting the church to a side a little bit. I was still keeping services and I was still tithing. So in 2023, one of the members that's in charge of me, my unit leader, he says if I want to study with him, and I agree. So I go to the church and we study, and he tells me, just like this, he tells me, Mother said that this year, this is the last, this is it. We're going to heaven this year. She's tired and she wants to go home. So this year, it's for sure it. He tells me this at the end of the study in 2023. And I'm just in my mind towards, it was like towards the end of the year, probably August, somewhere around that. I remember it was kind of hot. So I just kind of put that aside because I had heard this before, basically every year, and it's getting old for me. And in 2024, in the beginning, and this is one of the things that prompted me to just kind of do research. In a sermon in the morning, at the end of the sermon, I listen to the sermon and everything, and at the end it says these words. They say, "Let us work faithfully, and we will be at the gates of heaven at the end of 2024." And I'm just like, I just laugh because it's like, what are you guys talking about? Like, you guys have been saying this for 7 years now that I've been here. And that was just one of the things that made me more uncomfortable and to just want me to kind of like start looking into this group more closely.
Yeah, actually, I believe in 2022, Zhang Gil Jah, she had mentioned this year, all prophecies of the Bible will be fulfilled. Let's see. I'm sorry. No, that was 2020. She said all prophecies will be fulfilled. And sure enough, not all prophecies have been fulfilled. So every year it's the same thing. This year, is going to be the year. And, you work so hard, you give up everything thinking, here's the end of the world. It's right here this year. And then it's not. There's a lot of false predictions and a lot of lies that they tell about the end of the world. And then, the Bible teaches don't concern about days or times. And, but that's all they seem to be concerned about. That's all they seem to talk about is the hour of which this, end of the world will occur over and over. That's what they're preaching and they're talking about, and then when you say, hey, didn't you say that the world is about to end? Then they tell you, don't worry about times and dates, and we can't concern about it, but that's all they concern about. That's all they talk about. But
yeah,
so accurate.
Yeah. So you started then. You said that kind of made you willing to start to look into the church more. So did you do that? Did you go? Was there a point when you went online and started researching? What was that process like from going from 2020 when you kind of became less active, kind of started to get, I think, a little bit of your own self back, your own ability to kind of process things from that, but still attending, still keeping services, still tithing. How did you get from that to, I think this group is something I do not want to be a part of any longer?
So I kind of had been ignoring red flags for a little while. And the only time when I had done some research into this church was at the beginning of 2018. But I believe your channel wasn't there yet. It was only a certain group of people. I don't know what his name is. I'm sure if I looked it up, I would know. But
probably Mike Winger.
Possibly. But I saw some people, some people talking about it, and I saw those videos, but I stopped watching them because they made me really uncomfortable. Because they're talking against my strong beliefs, and they haven't seen what I've seen in the Bible, or at least that's what I'm thinking. They just haven't been indoctrinated the same way. But I would actually like to take this chance to mention some of the things that I saw happening in the church and how those things contradict the Bible. Because if I don't show what it actually says in the Bible, I don't think members are it's gonna help members a lot. So one of the things that made me uncomfortable to go there all the time was the fact that they record absolutely everything that they do. If they do a cleanup, they always have all their media team recording every single thing that they do. They don't do any service, whether it's donating blood, anything, without having a big media team there and just recording it and making it available for the public. But me reading the Bible, I actually wanna show what the Bible says about that. In Matthew 6, right at the beginning, it says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your right hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." So it's just total opposites from one another. They scream at everyone, look all this we're doing. Actually, as soon as you walk into the church, they have all these rewards up in the wall and this huge banner of the queens.
First time I went into the church, one of the very first things they did was led us over to the wall to point out the different awards they had and the different service projects they had done and things like that. So yeah,
and all their videos,
that was definitely my experience.
Yeah, all their videos, their introductory videos, the videos that they have people watch about the church, it's all covered. And look at our volunteer work. Look at what we did. And every volunteer effort, actually, they spend more time taking the photo than they do actually volunteering. I mean, I'm being a little like hyperbolic about it, but really that's their main focus is that they want these things captured because they want recognition. It's not about actually helping anybody. It's about, look at us and look at what we did. We're legitimate. We're a real church. Yeah. We're nice people. It's the image. It's a PR stunt. It's not actually about helping anybody.
Look at what the Bible says.
Yeah.
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is telling us not to do
exactly.
that. But that's exactly what they go and do. So that's one of the things that I really, because I do read the Bible and I knew that this was in there. So I was confused as to why we were doing things this way. And it wasn't optional either. You're going to be in the video and we're going to record it. So, and you have no say about it. So,
Ricardo, do you mind if I quickly share one little story about this very point? I remember we did a volunteer effort at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. And one of the things is they wanted us to wear our Church of God vests. And we were out there helping the public, showing them where to get to the garden, how to get there. It was like the cherry blossom event. So it was a very big event, like probably the big moneymaker for the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. And after a while, because members were trying to preach to people and then instruct them where to go, and because some people were thinking that the Brooklyn Botanical Garden had an affiliation with this cult group, they told us, guys, like, you need to change into our vests that say Brooklyn Botanical Garden if you're going to volunteer with us. I'm so sorry, but it's causing some conflict having you guys in your church vests. We signed up for this big event. They really needed the support. They felt like they had us. We went through long efforts of pre-planning to be there. And because they said you have to take off your Church of God vest and put on our vests, they gave up the entire effort right then and there. They made us all walk out. Like this large group of volunteers for this crazy day at the Brooklyn Botanical, we all just took off,
left,
just walked out on it. We were just told, guys, we're leaving. I'm like, we're supposed to be here for another couple hours. And they're like, no, they're not going to let us wear our church vests. So there's no reason for us to be here. So we left them high and dry and stranded without any volunteers because we had promised them to be volunteers. And because we weren't going to get the PR credit, being there in our vests, we walked away from them. So it's definitely about, for show. It's not about actually helping anybody or doing good things for the world. It's about getting something on camera that we can show off to people later. So,
yep. And that's one of the things that made me really uncomfortable and just inconsistent with the Bible teachings of Jesus Christ himself. Do you guys have a question?
So were there other things like that bothered you?
Two other things. So I've heard this. I've heard other former members say this in the past, but I'm gonna, confirm it here. They do believe that those who have some kind of disability or are homeless, they say that those people are that way because their sin in heaven was great. They sinned more than their sin was worse than anybody else in heaven. So as a punishment, God makes them be born that way. So they don't invite homeless. They don't allow homeless at the church. They don't. Because I asked this to the guy who recruited me. I told him, hey, is it cool if I preach to homeless people? He was like, no, not really, because you have to understand that they're that way because of they sin greatly in heaven. So and then I asked him about people who are disabled. If they can't keep all these commands, how are they saved? And he was like, well, they sin very greatly in heaven, so that's just their fate. And I was like, man, that really made me uncomfortable, but I just kind of put it under a rug. But after reading the Bible for a while, I found this verse that I would like to read in Luke 14. 14 verse 12, it says, then Jesus said to the host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So once again, two complete opposites of one another. What they were teaching is not what the Bible says at all, whether even in instructions or in how to treat them or who they are as people. So that's one of the things.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting how they get so fired up about things like Sabbath, and one of their initial pushes to a new member will be to, or a convert on the street will be to emphasize how, no other church is obeying the Bible and obeying the commands of God like we are, because look, no other church is keeping the Sabbath. And so they present themselves as having such a deep devotion to keeping all the commands of God and making sure they're being, obedient to the laws of Scripture, and at the same time, though, you have these clear teachings, these clear commands of Jesus that you find in the Gospels, and they seemingly just completely disregard them. It's almost amazing how clearly in contrast they are in their behaviors with what Jesus actually commands. And so on the one hand, they'll stress and emphasize how you have to obey, you have to keep the commands of God. And then at the same time, they are ignoring, some of the most clear and central and important commands. Really the thing that Jesus seemed to always bring it back to, which is loving your neighbor as yourself and looking out for the least of these, this teaching that the first will be last and the last will be first. It's the weak of the earth, the lowly, the oppressed, the crippled, the blind, the lame. These are the ones who are entering the kingdom, but they just seem to not be aware of these passages. It's something that makes you wonder, what have they read these passages? And I mean, that's like, what do, I guess, like, Anthony, for you as a member, having been a deacon even, I mean, it's just, I guess it's just hard for me to comprehend how you can, on the one hand, stress this devotion that you have to the Bible and the commands of God, but then some of the most, well-known teachings of Jesus. I mean, these are a lot of these things that you're reading here, Ricardo, like, don't do your works before others to be seen. Like, these are principles that are, pretty well known just in our culture even, and have kind of seeped into how the culture thinks and operates. And so it's strange to me that the culture of the WMS just seems to be oblivious to them. So I guess I was just curious, Anthony, like, what are your thoughts on that, as to why, what do they do with these commands of Jesus? Is it just that they don't read them? They just don't think about them? What do you think is going on there that would lead them to have such clearly established and articulated commands, and they're operating in a way that is just so evidently, in contrast to them?
Yeah, so they definitely take a different spin on things, because you have to know that they will say what they need to say to get what they want, and to not do what they don't want to do. So they don't want to be held accountable to help others, because that's time, money, resources given to somebody that's not part of the church. They want everything inside. So the way that they would describe, okay, when Jesus says give to the poor, well, who are the poor? Do we worry about their physical poverty? No. Spiritually, they're poor because they don't have the riches of heaven. Who are the blind? Those who cannot see the truth. We have to heal them. What about the crippled? What happens with a crippled person is that, what the mind says, the body does not do. But, who's the head of the church is Christ. And we as the church are the body. So if we're not following the instructions of Christ, then we are like a crippled person. So we have to heal the cripple, by having them do what Christ commands. So the only thing that you could do to help the poor, the blind, these are not to be taken physically, but spiritually poor, spiritually blind, spiritually handicapped, and teach them to follow the World Mission Society. That's the way that you fulfill those commandments. So they spin it. When they want it to be spiritual, it's spiritual. When they want it to be physical, it's physical. It depends on whatever is most convenient for them and what benefits their pockets the most. And even
obviously they're not going to spiritualize something like tithing or giving God the first of your increase, because they're going to want the physical money there. They want your cash, and they want your dollars, your physical income. When it comes to that, they're not going to spiritualize that and just, turn it into, well, you need to give God the first of your heart and the first of your love and your devotion. It's no, you need to give your money. And, but it's whatever's convenient to them. And I
would say too that in John chapter 9, when Jesus and his disciples saw a person who was born blind, they asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus said, neither this man nor his parents sinned. So here you have a blind person, and it's not because of his sin. It's not because of his parents' sin. He's born blind because this is an opportunity for Christ to display Christ's power and ability. So instead of viewing the handicapped, the poor, the blind as, oh, they're sinners and they deserve what they get because of what they did in heaven. No, this is an opportunity for we Christians in order to display the love of Christ, to display the works of Christ. They're not in this situation because they're bad, but they're in a situation that allows us to help. It gives us opportunity to follow the example of Christ.
Right.
So it's definitely, I think Jesus clearly says that the person's not born blind because of their sin, despite what the church teaches.
Yeah. That's just a great example of, again, how you have this clearly articulated thing. The WMS is saying that, oh, these people are in this condition they're blind, they're handicapped, they're homeless because of a sin in heaven. And the disciples it seemed in their own religious sort of mindset were kind of assuming the same thing. And so they asked Jesus that question, which was it? This man was born blind in this horrible situation. It seems like God doesn't like him or is more angry or upset with him than he is with us who, and others who weren't born in this condition. So whose fault is it? Is it his fault or the parents? And Jesus, as he usually does, just kind of upends that whole assumption and says, well, it was neither. It wasn't this man or his parents then. And so again, just Jesus saying the exact opposite of what the WMS says. So I think you had a third one, Ricardo.
Yeah. This one's a little bit long, or not long, but it kind of has a few verses tied to it, because one of the things that they use to separate you from your family is, if we go to Matthew 12, verse 40, you can start from 46. It reads, while Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. He replied to him, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. So the way they use this is by saying that, see, those who do the will of God, they are your family. Those who keep the Passover, those who keep the Sabbath day, basically those who belong to this church, they are your true family. Your physical family is just a shadow. So the ones that you have to be with is your spiritual family, and that's one of the things that they use to kind of pull you away from your actual family and into this culture and this group. But I would and then even in Matthew 7:21 it says, not everyone who does the will of my Father will not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. But what does the Bible say is the will of God? Because I have a couple of verses that really contradict what you guys are saying, and I could go to those right now real quick. In John chapter 6, verse 39, it says, this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of all those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. So you can clearly see that those who believe that the will of the Father is for people to believe in Jesus Christ, not for the keeping of the Sabbath, for the keeping of the Passover, any of those things. Even if you go to Thessalonians, and I'm sure you guys know these verses very well, but I just wanted to share them for people who haven't had the chance to hear those verses before. In 1 Thessalonians 5:18, very well verse. It says, verse 16, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So once again, we're seeing that no mention of the Sabbath day, no mention of the Passover. It's telling us to rejoice and to pray continuously and give thanks in no matter our circumstance. Another verse is on 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. Submit yourselves to the Lord for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Now they may say, yeah, to do good is to keep the Sabbath day. To do good is to keep the Passover and the feast and things like that. But very straightforward. If you go to Micah chapter 6, verse verse 8, it reads, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Once again, no mention of the Passover, no mention of the Sabbath day. So very contradictory to what they teach you is the will of God. They say that the will of God is the keeping of the Sabbath day and the Passover, and anyone who is not doing that is not doing the will of God. So anyone who is outside of that, your family members who aren't really, going along with the teachings of the WMS, they're not your real family. You're not going to see them in heaven. The ones who you're going to see in heaven are these who are keeping the Sabbath day, the Passover. But we can very clearly see in the Bible that that's really not what the will of God is described as in the Bible.
Yeah, another good one that I like to add to that too is 1 John 3 in 22. It says, whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do what pleases him. And this is his commandment. So again, if we're trying to figure out this question of, okay, what is God's will? What are his commandments that he requires of us? And it says this is his commandment, that we believe in the name of the Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another just as he commanded us. So again, another instance where when it's clearly laid out in the New Testament to the church, what is it that God requires? What does he demand? What are his laws? What are his rules that we have to keep? Is there a list of things we have to do? And it always comes back to these things. It's to, an expression of faith in God that manifests itself in loving others around us, and like the verse in Micah said, to love mercy, or however it words that, to have mercy and compassion for the people around you, including the homeless and the handicapped, and so on. So yeah, you don't see the list that you would expect if the WMSCOG doctrine is true. You would expect to be given a different list of commands and requirements that are laid out. But there's just no instance anywhere in the New Testament where any apostle, any New Testament writer will say, and this is what God commands for followers of Jesus Christ: to keep the Passover, to keep the Sabbath, to make sure you're tithing, to be bearing fruit by bringing in new converts, and all the rest of that. It's just, these were not priorities of the apostles or New Testament authors.
Exactly. Yep. And it's very sad, how they can use something so sacred as the words of God, as the Bible, and weaponize it just for their own benefit. And I have been a witness to that many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
So, then what led you finally, after COVID, after this experience, what led you to finally depart from the church, and what was that experience like for you to finally take that step away?
Well, this March, like I said, I had already seen these things, inconsistencies, all over the Bible, and just the way that people carry themselves in church, a lot of hypocrisy, and most of the times it's not even the members trying to be that way. It's just naturally that's how you become in there. Um, and I was a witness to that because once, like I said, I wasn't keeping all the services. I wasn't keeping all the services. I wasn't really going out to preach anymore a lot. I wasn't, and even I kind of stopped tithing towards the end of my last months there because I wasn't fully convinced that that was the truth anymore. So why am I gonna be giving them any more of my revenue if I'm not convinced at this point, you know? And they don't like that. They don't like that you're not 100% in because, well, this is just my opinion. I think that they see that other members are gonna see that. Oh, he's not coming every service. He's not going preaching. Is he gonna be saved? So it brings up this hard question for them to answer, right? Um, because there's this dilemma in the church whether, well, am I saved if I keep the Passover, or does the Passover become, well, how can I say it? Like, does it lose its effect if I don't come every Sabbath service? You know, so there's a lot of members probably asking themselves that question right now, and I was doing that too. But I would see when I would go, I would see the hostility towards me because I'm not so committed like all of they are. I'm not trying to be there all the time. You know, I'm just not trying to devote all my life to them anymore because it's been hurting me. It's been affecting me in many ways in my life, and I just can't keep going for so long. But I can see how their love is definitely very. It just depends on how you act, or how much you like, how much you listen to them, how much you give into their demands. And if you're not giving into their demands fully, then they're not gonna give you the same treatment. And that's what I saw. That's what I experienced. So one night, I was just laying in bed, unable to sleep, and this had been bothering me for a while. I still hadn't done any research or nothing, but I just couldn't go to sleep. And these thoughts were the ones that were keeping me up. And it was about 10, 11, midnight, somewhere around that, when I was like, you know what, I need to do some research into this and see what other people have to say about it and put it to the test and see if it's gonna, if we can prove that it's right, if nobody can, expose it or whatever. And man, the stuff that I found was just too much to continue being a part of this group. I think the most impactful thing for me, not only listening to other members' testimonies and listening to how you can actually contradict their beliefs using the Bible, how you can refute all the beliefs, basically the seal of God, the sealed scroll in Revelation 5, all those things you can easily refute those using the Bible. They just don't show you those verses. Um, but the one thing that I could really see that this is not from God is when I saw that they were suing a member for money for speaking out. That's the one thing when I saw this. There's no way this organization is from God. They're doing this, and it just started seeming kind of dark for me. Um, yeah, after I saw all those things, it was very clear to me that this is not somewhere where I should invest any more of my time in. And I went and I kept one more service, and I really paid attention to how everything was being carried out. And after that one service, I decided to never go back. And it really hit me. It really hit me very, very hard because of everything that I had given up, all the time that I had lost with my family. It just kind of all just kind of hit me at one time, and I kind of fell really into depression, like very, very, very strongly. And that was before I reached out to you, Anthony. Before I found you, I believe I found you on Instagram. And I followed you, and I think you messaged me. So, but before that, I was really just very sad, very lonely. No one in the church wanted to talk to me because they asked me why I left. So I was telling them why I left, and then they didn't want to talk to me anymore. So I don't have any friends. And well, luckily there's been people who are my true friends who have stuck by my side even through this whole process, and I still have them in my life, and they still show love to me, and I appreciate that. My family has always been here for me, and when I had never spoken anything negatively about this church, or I couldn't, because I was still trying to bring people in, and if I said anything bad about them, then they probably wouldn't want to come in. So, and then their salvation would have been compromised. So it is not until, and this, I believe this is the case for all members, it is not until you get out that you have a chance to reflect on everything that's been done to you, and now you're free to speak out. So it's been very hard for me just to even process everything that I've gone through, everything that I've lost, and how this has affected many of my relationships. Um, but I want to say, just I think reading the Bible, and understanding who Jesus Christ really is, what He's done for us, um, and what the gospel actually is. That those are the things that have brought me the most peace in my life.
When you decided to finally leave, I do believe that a lot of times when they reach out when you first leave, they want to hear the story because they have to come up with a spin about what happened, because there's never in a cult a valid reason to separate yourself from the group. So a lot of it is just them getting something to report back so that they can create a story about, that's somewhat consistent. Like they want to take the truth and add a little bit of their spin and a little bit of their lie to it, because they can't let members think that there was anything wrong with the church that would cause somebody to leave. It had to be something wrong with Ricardo. Ricardo was deficient. Ricardo was wrong, and he left because of his sin, because of, look, he stopped tithing everything, that's why he left. Look, but these are because you were opening your eyes to what this organization really was. But they'll say that it's because you did this, that's why you lost your faith. But so afterward, one thing you said that really kind of like hit home was how you were never able to really explain to people in your life all the bad stuff you had to experience in the church, because you had hope that you could still bring them to the church, and you hid that to protect the church, because if people saw what the church really did, it's like they wouldn't understand. It's like an abusive relationship where, like, maybe somebody's getting beat by their spouse, and it's because it's such stress at home, such stress at work. I can't tell people about what's happening. I'm going to have to lie to everybody because they're not going to understand the situation. It's just like that, where
because you've been kind of programmed into thinking that you're responsible for the well-being of your abuser. Ultimately, that it's your job to protect them, to defend them, to keep them from looking bad. Yeah, and so you're trying to protect both your abuser and you hide the dirty details, quote unquote, because you want to protect your family. You know that if you reveal these things, it could ultimately harm those that you're telling them to, because it could push them away from what you think is the truth. And
100%. So during my time in this organization, those were probably the darkest years of my life. And that's when I felt the loneliest. Is when I felt the most sad, the most anxious. So much pressure gets to you, and they really mess with your mind, man. Like I appreciate giving some good examples of that here. Uh, and I'm someone who overthinks a lot. I'll sit down and just think about things a lot. And those ideas that they put in me really made me go through some really tough times mentally. But like I said, you have to keep that to yourself, because if you share that with a member, they don't like that. They see that as you having weak faith, and you can't talk about that with anybody outside because you might hurt their chance of being saved.
So if you do say something that potentially will make somebody not want to go to the church, what you just did is preventing them from, salvation, and then their blood is on
Exactly.
your hands. Like you had mentioned before, it's, I could, comfort myself and have somebody to speak to that's not going to report me, but I'm going to compromise their potential salvation, and it will cost them their eternity if I tell them about it. So I could definitely see how I was in the same situation. I would have to be untruthful to my family and friends, whoever I would, acquaintances, coworkers, and anybody. I couldn't tell them about my life because it was just, I didn't want the church to look bad. So I'd always be making up a false story about what my life looked like in reality, just because I didn't want people to view the church negatively.
Exactly.
But if you could now tell us, now that you've separated yourself from the church and now that you're living your life and rebuilding, I know that there's a what the heck moment when you first leave and you try to figure out like what to do and what you just went through. Where are you in that process of, one, kind of reflecting back on what you just experienced from 2017 until recently, and what are you currently doing and plan to do for rebuilding and kind of making up for time lost?
Yeah. So it's been rough. I want to say the first month was the hardest. Then afterwards, it got a little better. Right now, I'm super happy. I'm the happiest I have been in 7 years. I have the most peace I have had in a while. And I was able to talk to my family and to my friends and offer an apology to them for whatever I might have done while being in this group. One thing that really helped me to kind of understand what I had gone through is not only watching the testimonies of people in this channel, which, once again, thank you for everyone who is brave enough to come on here and talk about your experience. It really does help. It helped me. But also looking into other groups such as Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, groups of this sort, and just realizing and understanding that it's something that's happening a lot in the world. There's a lot of groups like this that are deceptive, that will not be upfront with you, that basically disguise themselves as true followers of Jesus Christ. One thing that has helped me a lot is reading the Bible. So, and just praying to God for the Holy Spirit so that I might be given the knowledge necessary for having a good connection with God and understanding the gospel and putting the commands of God into practice. So I'm still in that journey. I feel like I've come a long way from where I was when I was in the cult. And you just kind of going back to the things that I love doing, and being with the people that I love, my family, my friends, and trying to learn who I am once again, because when you're in there, you kind of lose a sense of who you are, and you have to work to get that back. So I'm still in that process, but honestly, I'm kind of enjoying it.
And then what made you want to, I know you covered it a little bit, but just to reiterate, what is it that makes you want to come on here? What makes you want to speak out? Because honestly, I know I personally appreciate it, and I'm very thankful that you're telling your story, because the more stories that are out there, the more people can relate, the more just more awareness that goes out into the world. So I'm thankful that you're here to share your story. But what is it that kind of inspired you to want to speak out about
Well,
this?
a big part of it is really understanding what it is that I was put through, understanding that I'm not the only one who's going through this, that there's a lot of people who are going through the same thing, who are being misled the same way, and just to help shed some light into it, because I know that seeing their testimonies helped me, and I want to be able to help people also. And I invite you, if you're seeing this, if you're a member, if you're struggling with anything, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I'm here for you, as I'm sure Anthony and Jordan and other members are. We understand what it is that you're going through, and for me, it's also very important for hopefully people who see this, who know me personally, will kind of understand what it is that I've gone through all these years a little better, a little more in detail, and why it is that I was behaving in such a way, which is not me really.
Do you have an email that you would be willing to, like, that I would be able to share, like in the video description, where people who might, obviously people can always reach out to us, to Anthony and myself and the other members through our email, but sometimes they might hear a specific story or testimony like yours, and they might resonate with it and want to talk to you specifically. So do you have an email or something that I'd be able to share in the video description, so that if somebody does want to contact you, they'd be able to?
They can reach out to me in my email. It's garate.gv, as in Victor, at gmail.com. And then that
Okay,
same, those same
cool.
garate.gv, that's also my Instagram. You guys are more than welcome to hit me up there if you want to talk. And I was a member of the World Mission Society Church of God here in San Diego, in Santee.
Yeah, because I think that helps a lot of people. I think a lot of people, especially those on the cusp of leaving, who are still in, but just kind of at that place of probably stepping back a bit from their devotion and to the WMS and asking questions. I think a lot of them are just wanting somebody to talk to who can answer some of the questions, because it seems like everybody has a different question or handful of questions that they're kind of hung up on. And so I think sometimes it just helps to talk with somebody else who's gone through it, who's gone out and on the other side, to kind of help walk alongside, as others are going through that same process. So yeah, again, I'll put that email in the description below if you do want to reach out to Ricardo.
And I want to say, first of all, thanks to you, man, for the work that you do. It really helps out, probably even more than you realize. There's probably people who have gotten helped by your videos who you have never even heard of. So amazing work that you're doing. Anthony was one of the first people that I was able to talk to after I got out, and he connected me with Edgar. Shout out to you, brother. Thanks for the help and understanding the Bible. And it's good to reach out to those people who have gone through the same experiences as you, because they'll be able to help you and give you some advice as to how to move forward from this. So yeah.
Well, Ricardo, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing. And yeah, I'm glad to see where you're at now. You seem happy and healthy. I see that guitar behind you. So hopefully you're getting back to your passion there, or will eventually. Yeah, I just appreciate you being willing to come on and share, because I'm sure, as you just said to me, this will help. You being willing to share your story is going to help people that you also will probably never hear from. So just appreciate you and all the others who are willing to come on and share, because I know it's not easy. I'm sure in a lot of ways it's difficult, and you have to be vulnerable and public, and it's kind of a weird deal to come out and share publicly to hundreds or possibly thousands of people that will watch what you experience. But it is helping people. So thank you.
For sure, man. It's my pleasure, and thanks for having me here. It means a lot.
Thank you for watching that video. Everything I do on this channel and all the videos and interviews that you might be watching are only made possible because of financial supporters. And so if you have any interest in supporting Great Light Studios, you can find links in the description below this video where you can find different ways that you can help me continue to make content like this.